Hey, unified dumbass here. Today I'm going to explain the grand unified theory using my one-dimensional mechanical string. At the absolute beginning, before the expansion, there is no empty space, no depth, and no matter. The entire universe is a single, hyper-compressed, taut, static, 1D string. This is time. It is taut because it is static tension. The first dimension is a static, one-dimensional line. The separation of the forces wasn't a change in the rules of physics. It was a geometric fragmentation of that single original tension. Because there is only one dimension, there are no surfaces for waves to travel across, and no volumes to create a slope. Every single bit of potential energy is locked into one raw, uniform, ultra-high tension line. This is the unified force, because the medium has no room to behave in any other way. It is a single wire, pulled perfectly taut. Gravity is the first force to split. The 1D line starts warping and stacking to create width, the second dimension. The second dimension starts warping and stacking to create 3D volume. The first dimension creates the second dimension. The second dimension creates the third dimension. The second the universe gains volume and space, you suddenly have a massive difference between the hyperdense center, where the expansion started, and the less dense, empty space surrounding it. This creates an immediate macro-scale displacement, a slope in the newly formed 2D sheets. Gravity separates first simply because the universe got big. It is the macro tension of the entire sheet adjusting to the creation of space and volume. Now imagine all the different things you can do to a string. You can fold it, you can create knots, and you can break it. As the universe continues to expand and cool, the remaining unified force is forced to distribute its tension across a sprawling, chaotic, porous network. The single force splits into three localized mechanical behaviors based on how the sheet is folded. The warping of the first dimension creates the second dimension. The warping of the second dimension creates the third dimension. When the first dimension warps and stacks on top of itself, it'll create the second dimension, a knot in the first dimension. When the second dimension warps and stacks on top of itself, it'll create a knot in the third dimension. To keep the expanding universe from just dissolving into a flat, empty space, certain regions of the 2D sheet twist and lock into hyperdense, localized knots, forming the first subatomic particles. When you pull a knot tight, the friction holding the overlapping threads together becomes incredibly intense. The strong force is just the mechanical resistance of that tight 2D knot refusing to uncoil. It only works at tiny distances because once you step outside the knot, the sheet is flat again. Electromagnetism is the surface interaction of the second dimension. As the 2D sheets flatten out and stabilize into open space, they form wide, continuous planes. Now if you shake one part of a tight sheet, a ripple travels down the line. Light can only travel as fast as the medium allows. This is electromagnetism. It is the force of surface waves traveling across the flat 2D faces of the matter heap. It handles light and charge bouncing off the walls. Because these knots are being twisted inside a violently expanding universe, the tension inside some of them spikes past the breaking point. The string pulls too tight and experiences a structural snap. The weak force is the literal snapping or tearing of the paper/string at the subatomic level. When that microscopic rip happens, it releases a burst of energy as the remaining structure stabilizes. The weak force is the mechanical trigger for a thought, the tiny localized rip inside a dark matter hole that momentarily creates an internal vortex before healing itself. You'll have to watch my consciousness video to understand what this means. Tension is the single variable that dictates everything. By adding or removing tension, the universe is knowable.